employed by us. So you have got just this job.
Have you ever seen a mayor behave more like a reality TV celebrity than a public official? If you thought small-town politics were boring, think again. The drama surrounding Henyard is nothing but power struggles, wasteful spending litigation, and even corruption charges. Not quite an opera. Brace up as we delve deeply into the turmoil that has engulfed Dolton, Illinois, with Henyard at its center. The ongoing battle between the Board of Trustees and the so-called super mayor is full of twists and turns that keep everyone on edge.
Motion to terminate Chief.
The embattled mayor of Dolton, a small Chicago suburb with a population of about 200, is once again at the center of controversy, this time over the town's budget. At a recent Board of Trustees meeting, tensions peaked as Henyard, who is known for her bold and frequently haughty demeanor, attempted to expedite the budget approval process. She entered the meeting with characteristic confidence, insisting that the budget must be passed immediately, but the trustees were unmoved and stood their ground. Their refusal to simply approve her agenda without conducting a thorough review caused the trustees to argue that a proper finance meeting was required so that residents could fully review and weigh in on the budget details before it was approved. However, the trustees and residents were not amenable to this request for transparency, which led to frustration among both parties. Many residents felt that their concerns about financial mismanagement under Henyard's leadership were being disregarded without consideration as the meeting got more heated. Given the town's current financial difficulties, the trustees emphasized the significance of fiscal accountability. Henyard retorted that any postponements would only make the town's problems worse. Henyard's turbulent term as mayor has been characterized by scandals, accusations of financial mismanagement, and a widening gap between her administration and the citizens she was elected to represent. The board meeting quickly turned into a heated standoff that symbolized the greater power struggle that has come to define her tenure. The community was left wondering if their voices would ever be heard under her administration, as the residents became more outspoken in their displeasure and expressed frustration with Henyard's insistence on passing the budget without adequate scrutiny. It became evident that this budget battle was about much more than just the financial numbers. Rather, it was a flaw in deeper issues of trust governance and Henyard's controversial leadership style.
Appointment, that's what the trustees I talked to are calling this. They say the news took them by surprise, and now they're talking to legal counsel to figure out their name.
Let's establish the scene. In keeping with her usual boldness, Mayor Tiffany Henyard enters the boardroom prepared to demand that Dolton's budget be approved immediately, without any further reviews or delays. She is firm, assertive, and almost demanding, insisting that it's time to move forward with her argument that she has already done everything the trustees asked of her, held discussions, made adjustments, and checked off all the necessary boxes. In her opinion, there is no reason for further back and forth, and there is little room for negotiation. However, the trustees aren't buying it. Confused, frustrated, and probably fed up, as they confront her with a wall of Tammy Brown, the trustee for skepticism, is a shining illustration of this opposition. As she hears Henyard's insistence, her countenance says 1,000 words. Her fatigue is evident in the fact that Brown, one of her fellow trustees, is unwilling to approve this budget without first conducting due diligence. She wants accountability and transparency, and most importantly, she wants to make sure that the residents of Dolton, who will be the ones affected by this budget, have a chance to express their opinions. However, as is all too common with Henyard, she ignores these concerns and moves forward with a single focus that doesn't allow for much discussion. The tension in the room is evident when the trustees' reluctance and Henyard's demands collide. Resolute patience has never been her strong suit, and tonight is no exception. She firmly believes that a proper process must be followed, including a public finance meeting where residents can examine the budget and ask questions. She also reiterates her position that additional evaluations and public discussion are unnecessary, believing that waiting is a luxury. Many in the room are shocked by her defiance, including the trustees who are responsible for maintaining the public's confidence in trustworthy Brown and others. Dolton cannot afford Bo, and openness is simply a barrier that is impeding progress. The budget is no longer the only consideration. Principled leadership and the increasing perception that Mayor Henyard prefers imposing rules over exercising collaborative leadership, with Dolton already suffering from the demand for accountability is greater than ever for many residents due to financial difficulties and allegations of mismanagement under Henyard's administration. This budget is more than just a policy document. It's a test of whether their concerns will be taken seriously and whether their voices will be heard. However, as Henyard continues on her unyielding course, her refusal to participate in a more inclusive and transparent process only serves to fuel suspicion and dissatisfaction among many in the room, and her insistence on urgency feels. The gathering turns into a symbolic one, less like bold leadership and more like an effort to avoid criticism. Showdown is a microcosm of the greater conflicts that have come to characterize Henyard's leadership style. As the trustees resist and Henyard pushes harder, it becomes clear that this is about trust governance and whether or not Dolton can continue operating under the shadow of a mayor whose strategy appears to put expediency ahead of accountability. At its core, this is an ideological conflict. As the night rolls on, the tension in the room increases with each exchange between the trustees' demand for a democratic, transparent process and Yard's use of forceful techniques. Trustees, the stakes are really high. It's not just about passing a budget. It's about Dolton's future and whether its leadership is prepared to uphold the values that the community expects and deserves. It remains to be seen if Henyard's unyielding position will prevail or if the trustees' demands for transparency will be heard. But one thing is certain, this is a referendum on Henyard's tenure that will have long-term effects on the entire town.
We knew it was going to be a little messy, but it's just something we felt important that had to be done, that should be done. So, but like I said, yeah, some kind
The real drama starts when Mayor Tiffany Henyard demands that the trustees approve Dolton's budget right away. Her signature bluster takes center stage, and she is adamant about getting the budget passed with little scrutiny. However, the trustees, far from backing down, start to push back, revealing the weaknesses in Henyard's leadership style. One of the first to express doubt about why a genuine finance meeting has not yet been held, a crucial stage in the process. Jason House's incisive query highlights Henyard's disregard for due process and sets the tone for what becomes a heated night after trustee Norwood Brittany, unafraid to speak her mind, accuses Henyard of being opaque and neglecting to communicate with the board and residents. How about you, as a good leader, bring proposals to the forefront so that not only us, but also the residents and the rest of America are aware of it? The group waits breathlessly for Henyard's answer to Norwood's scathing remarks, but although she tries to regain control of the meeting at one point, she doesn't back down and instead intensifies her rebellious posture. Henyard's tone is condescending, as if she's reminding the trustees who's in charge. What could have been a chance for cooperation swiftly turns into a power struggle as Henyard tells them in a dramatic lecture that they want to hear from the mayor and that you haven't learned that I'm the leader. Passing the budget becomes less important than establishing her control over the board. While the trustees continue to stand their ground and show signs of frustration, this is no longer merely a dispute over financing priorities or statistics. Rather, it is a conflict over the values of open governance and responsibility. Henyard's leadership style, which puts control and expediency ahead of unity and dialogue, is the fundamental problem at hand, and it is starting to wear thin. The trustees' dissatisfaction grows as the meeting drags on, and her refusal to address their concerns or participate in a formal review process shows a worrying contempt for the exact checks and balances that are designed to safeguard the public interest. Trustee Norwood's emphasis on accountability strikes a deep chord, but the problem goes beyond Henyard's harsh methods and encompasses her larger practice of ignoring important democratic procedures in order to advance her goal. Emphasizing what the people of Dolton are due Henyard's dual role as both the mayor of Dolton and the supervisor of Thoron Township looms large in the background, adding fuel to the fire. While that aspect of her leadership has its own complexities at the moment, It feeds into the larger narrative of her perceived overreach and inability to effectively juggle competing responsibilities. This duality has raised questions about whether Henyard's focus on consolidating power has come at the expense of Dolton's governance with her push to bulldoze. The budget's approval without additional examination reflects broader worries about her administration's lack of openness and disrespect for teamwork. What could have been a productive discussion turns into a glaring conflict that is a reflection of the power dynamics at work, and even though Dolton Henyard keeps insisting that there should be no delays and that it's time to proceed, her strategy doesn't have much of an impact on the trustees, who go even further and refuse to approve the budget without careful consideration. Now the fight is about more than just numbers. It's about establishing a standard for how leadership should work in Dolton. The trustees make it clear that they will not allow Henyard's impatience or authoritarian tendencies to override the need for due process for the people of Dolton. The stakes are extremely high because the budget is more than just a financial document. It is a representation of how their taxes will be used, how their community will be governed, and how their elected officials will prioritize issues that are important to residents. The conflict between the Henyard administration and many locals highlights the trustees' reluctance to back a mayor who seems to put her personal agenda ahead of openness and inclusivity. And the people she says she represents, it is becoming more and more clear that Henyard's strategy of passing the budget without considering important issues is backfiring. Her refusal to make concessions only makes the trustees more determined to stick to their position that the budget needs to be properly evaluated and public input in a community that is already struggling financially and has a history of distrusting local government. The more Henyard sinks her heels, the more resolute the trustees appear to be in their determination to ensure that this fight is not only about passing a budget, but also about the future course of Dolton itself. That the budget is given the consideration it merits. What started out as a routine procedural meeting has evolved into a pivotal event for the town, with the community closely observing to determine whether its leaders will place a higher priority on accountability, transparency, and inclusivity, or permit one leader to set the terms of governance. Concerns over the trustees' future in the town are reflected in the atmosphere in the room. This gathering will determine whether or not Dolton can continue under Henyard's leadership, or if a change in direction and leadership that upholds democratic values is necessary. More than just a budget, the integrity of the governance that will shape Dolton's future is at stake, and the residents and trustees are searching for leadership that prioritizes openness and cooperation over the unbridled power of a single individual.
A one-day purchase of over $40,000 to Amazon. And the main thing is,
during a heated budget meeting, Trustee Tammy Brown made the reasonable and unambiguous request that the residents and the Finance Committee conduct a review prior to approving the proposed budget. Brown's demand for accountability and transparency appeared to be a sensible move to guarantee fiscal responsibility, but Mayor Tiffany Henyard was anything but amenable to her demands. She was adamant about avoiding these extra levels of scrutiny, which was as contentious as it was stubborn. She was focused on her own agenda and wanted to see the budget approved as soon as possible, disregarding demands a thorough assessment that could clarify important financial issues. In the weeks and months after the meeting, the conflict between Henyard and the trustees grew more intense, and the flaws in Dolton's governance structure became more noticeable. This resistance was just another flashpoint in a leadership saga that had already become increasingly tense. From procedural disputes to a wider uproar against Henyard's, the discord grew over time. Overall leadership methodology, the trustees, who were already weary from the never-ending arguments, became increasingly irate at Henyard's resistance to making concessions or embracing transparency. She was at odds not only with the board, but also with the residents she claimed to represent because of her style of governance, which was characterized by unilateral decision-making and a propensity to dismiss concerns. Allegations that went far beyond political mismanagement ultimately led to a flurry of lawsuits against her, accusing her of everything from forging checks to withholding. As the lawsuits grew, so did the board's and the public's frustration and disbelief, producing a sense of betrayal for residents who had trusted Henyard's leadership. Amid these actions, the issue of Henyard's spending emerged as one of the most obvious and contentious aspects of her tenure, with reports of extravagant expenditures. The unregulated use of public monies and opaque financial transactions fueled the already raging fire from upscale travel and luxury accommodations for hedonistic shopping sprees. The growing resentment among trustees and residents alike was evident as financial decisions became representative of what many perceived as a complete disregard for fiscal accountability. Many wondered how a village already facing a $7 million deficit could afford such reckless financial behavior from its highest office. For the trustees, this was more than just a disagreement over meetings and budgets. It meant a deeper failure of governance, trust, and leadership over the course of these months. Board meetings continued to be contentious, with each session feeling more like a battlefield for procedural and ideological warfare than a chance for effective government. The ongoing emphasis placed by Henyard on establishing authority over the board instead of encouraging cooperation increased the hostility that already existed. By failing to address issues or show accountability, the budget debate turned into a symbolic fiasco that symbolized Dolton's financial stability as well as a struggle for control over who actually held authority in the tiny suburban village. Caused a sense of haughtiness, widening the gap between herself, the trustees, and the community. For the residents, the stakes were very personal, and calls for openness and participation in financial matters reverberated loudly in a village that was struggling financially. Brown's proposal to include residents in the Finance Committee, which at first glance seemed like a simple way to foster trust, now seemed like a necessary step to reclaim control over Dolton's financial management and hold Henyard accountable. The residents' concerns went well beyond line items and spreadsheets as Henyard continued to reject calls for reform and cooperation. The atmosphere grew more antagonistic. Tensions erupted in meetings where her defiance clashed with the trustees' growing determination to demand accountability, and legal battles and budget disputes were no longer isolated. They were about trust, faith in their leadership, and making sure that public resources were being used responsibly. Incidents, but they were a sign of deeper systemic flaws under Henyard's leadership. The situation depicted a dark picture of a community on the verge of collapse, with its leaders engaged in an unsolvable battle for integrity and control. Despite the trustees' attempts to control spending, increase oversight, and guarantee that the residents of Dolton had a say, the gap between the community and the government only grew wider the longer the Henyard administration refused to embrace transparency. Henyard, his counselor, was intended to serve here, but when he continued on in Dolton, the stakes were as the village's existence hung in the balance. The community's trust in its leadership was quickly diminishing. What had begun as a straightforward request for openness had developed into a full-fledged conflict for the town's soul, its guiding ideals of responsibility, governance, and trust, now the cornerstone of a conflict that would determine its future.
That is my heart that you are up here at this special meeting and not downstairs where we have
Tiffany Henyard, the mayor of Dixon, Illinois, and her team have been the subject of a recent report that has raised serious concerns about their extravagant use of taxpayer funds. The report claims that Henyard and her team spent over $67,000 on trips to cities like Portland, Austin, Atlanta, and New York City. In Atlanta, they stayed at the opulent Four Seasons Hotel, which racked up a bill of over $99,000. While in New York, they stayed at the Marriott Marquis in Times Square, which cost way more than $113,000. Henyard has been using public monies to pay for a number of costly expenditures, including lavish dinners, first-class flights, upscale hotels, and even billboards with her image all over the city. Spending by Henyard on personal security is another major worry. Henyard has allegedly been using taxpayer funds to pay for her personal bodyguards, including village police officers. These officers have reportedly been given the responsibility of picking up her daughter from school and acting as her personal security shopping companions. Their overtime pay has reportedly topped $1 million. Additionally, an investigation led by Special Investigator Lur Lightfoot revealed that Henyard has used the village's financial resources for personal purchases at stores like Amazon, Target, Walgreens, and Wayfair. One particularly startling purchase that was reported to have been made at Amazon was $443,000. This raises concerns about whether taxpayer resources should be allocated in this manner. The money that could have been used to improve public safety in the village instead seems to have gone towards providing Henyard with personal protection. In a single year, the accusations made regarding these transactions have been so severe that they have led to FBI investigations, which have increased worries about her financial manager's moral behavior and her questionable acts. In addition to her spending patterns, she shocked many by firing the police chief without the village board's consent late last year. As a result, Robert Collins, the fired police chief, filed a lawsuit against the village. This is just one of many legal battles the mayor and the people in Dolton are becoming more and more irate. Some have even started calling Henyard the Dolton dictator, accusing her of using her position to punish those who disagree with her. Local business owners have also expressed their displeasure, citing, for instance, Lawrence Gardner, a Dolton business owner, who claims that Henyard closed his trucking company after he refused to donate $3,500 to her political campaign. This is another instance of how her management style is being likened to that of a mob boss. Critics claim that the drug's analogy to Nino Brown is inaccurate. From the 1991 movie, Kingpin, she frequently creates New Jack City because of her dictatorial style and her emphasis on upholding allegiance and control through several court cases. Although Henyard is still in power, her position is being increasingly challenged due to controversies and investigations surrounding her. The FBI is reportedly investigating her spending, there are numerous pending lawsuits, and the Village Board of Trustees is actively opposing her actions. Given all of these issues, it is evident that the situation in Dolton is far from over and that things will only get worse before they get better. Better fan reactions to the situation have been mixed, with many people expressing frustration at Henyard's leadership style. One fan called her a filibuster, someone who talks quickly and endlessly, wearing people down with her words. This fan's observation highlights a strategy that Henyard appears to use. If she talks for a long enough period of time, maybe people will get tired and stop questioning her, but her tactics aren't working on the village board, who still oppose her. Another fan made a dark joke that implied that Henyard's spending habits could eventually land her in prison, drawing a comparison to. Despite the public outcry and the growing number of investigations, there is a growing belief that Henyard's actions could eventually have serious legal repercussions due to the corruption that is frequently associated with public office. Henyard doesn't appear to care about the criticism. She has strengthened her stance against her detractors and persisted in asserting her authority. At one point at a public forum, she'd accused her opponents of attacks just because she is a black woman in leadership. You should all feel ashamed of yourselves because you are all black, and you are sitting here beating and attacking black women in positions of power, she'd addressed the trustees. The residents of Dolton are left wondering what the future holds as the situation continues to unfold. Will Henyard be able to maintain power despite the growing challenges and opposition, or will the lawsuits and investigations eventually catch up with her? This audacious statement left many in the room speechless and raised additional questions about her leadership style and her ability to manage the crisis surrounding her. It will take time to determine the next chapter in this story, but one thing is certain, the situation in Dolton is far from over and will likely become even more contentious in the coming months as the investigation and legal battles unfold. All eyes will be on Henyard and her future in office. Will she weather the storm, or will the pressure ultimately bring her down?